Rico is widely regarded as the weakest character in Xenogears. While I would concur with that, I do think he has some strengths that are overlooked by most players. We'll start with Rico's best point, his gear. Steer is a pretty straightforward damage dealer. He has an attack multiplier of 12, which is the highest in the game, tied with Xenogears and Zeebsen. Steer also has a weight capacity of 1200, only surpassed by Zeebsen's. This is quite needed, as with a low agility of 7, losing speed from equipment would be incredibly detrimental. In terms of equipment, Steer doesn't really need anything to be good. He's usable right out of the box, assuming his engine is up to date. I think this is definitely another one of Steer's strengths. A lot of characters we've discussed before require a number of accessories to reach their max potential, sometimes expensive ones. Steer can get away with minimal upkeep, which is good for the rest of your party to absorb resources. Obviously, with 7 agility, Steer's biggest weakness is its speed, but thanks to Booster, you can offset it a bit. Steer also has another issue that I don't see talked about a lot, that being his availability. Rico doesn't join in full until just before the Goliath factory, and Maria joins just after Babel Tower. This is important because Zeebsen pretty much outclasses Steer in every way. Zeebsen joins with better equipment and parts, and a higher weight capacity, more agility, the same power multiplier, and on top of that, more powerful ether options. It's able to fill the exact same role as Rico while also competing with Ellie. Steer pretty much only gets 2 dungeons plus a couple of boss fights to be useful, one of those 2 dungeons being Babel Tower, where ether is a lot more valuable than physical damage output. It's a bit unfortunate that he gets replaced so quickly, but he does at least function as a low investment gear for the Goliath factory and can be helpful for a few bosses before Maria joins. Speaking of being outclassed, let's talk about Rico on foot. Rico unfortunately has pretty much inferior stats to every single other party member. In terms of his archetype, he's supposed to be most comparable to Faye. While Faye is supposed to be a jack-of-all-trades sort of character with better ether, Rico is supposed to be a slower brawler character. The issue is that even at the things Rico is supposed to be good at, Faye does a better job. Faye is going to start at a higher level than him, with more HP. While Rico does have slightly higher attack than Faye, the difference is very small. It's the same with their defenses too. Of course, their biggest difference is their speed. Faye has 11 agility, while Rico is stuck with a pitiful 7. This completely invalidates the slight attack and defense lead Rico has over Faye. For every 2 turns Rico gets, Faye gets 3. That's not the end of it though, Faye has an even better spell list than Rico. Rico gets a total of 4 spells, starting with just 2. Steel Fist raises his attack, which is pretty good, and Steel Body does absolutely nothing. So, yeah. Speaking of spells that do absolutely nothing, Rico learns Steel Spirit at level 50, which raises his ether defense. I don't think you need me to tell you how bad this is. At level 60, Rico can finally take advantage of his incredible ether stat with Steel Metal. Yeah, this spell's awful too. Okay, so Rico's stats are worse than Faye's, and his spells are worse than Faye's. It couldn't get any worse, right? Well, let's talk about availability again. Faye is pretty much always in the party, save for 1 arc, while Rico doesn't join until Kislev. This is important because active party members get 100% of the EXP won in battle, while inactive members, including those who haven't joined you yet, get 75%. This is just the cherry on top for Rico, because now not only are his stats completely inferior, he's 10 levels behind Faye when he joins. I think that paints a pretty clear picture of how good Rico is and if you should use him, but I do want to delve a little bit deeper. All this that we've just talked about is in complete contrast to Rico's first appearance. He's an unbeatable boss who absolutely crushes Faye and doesn't take any damage from him at all. Sure, Faye's faster, but he can't compete with Rico's raw power. When he joins, however, he completely betrays this expectation, having become weaker than Faye in pretty much every way in addition to his lower speed. Rico was the undeniable king of the prison for years, but the second he joins you, he becomes inexplicably weaker. That's all ignoring the lore surrounding demi-humans and Xenogears. Typically they have a higher ether response than humans, which Rico obviously betrays as well. While he does have some spells, they're his weakest aspect, and his defense buff doesn't even work. In comparison to the rest of the party, it's just laughable. The game almost tries to remedy this, giving him the memento chain, but this just doesn't change anything at all. That's ignoring the fact that it takes up an accessory slot which he sorely needs for speed rings to even hold his own against the other party members. So, where did it all go wrong? Well, it's due in part to some sloppy design. Most characters have an internal level of 1, and they gain that 75% EXP up until they join. Rico, however, starts at level 10 with level 1 stats, meaning he missed out on 9 levels. This just further compounds his weaknesses. Even ignoring that though, the game doesn't place Rico in a very favorable place when he joins. Even if Rico was better than Faye in terms of physical stats, he's still fighting against the player's familiarity to Faye and the investment into his equipment. We see this with new players in Maria. Maria is pretty much a direct upgrade to Ellie on foot, and despite that, is overlooked by most players. And this is a case where she has genuine strengths over Ellie and is placed in a very good light in her joining dungeon. Rico, in contrast, will be laying face first in the sewage while Citan and Faye clean up Red Room. So, having discussed all of Rico's problems, how could the devs have gone about making him a character the player is more likely to use? In this hypothetical scenario, I'm going to assume that Rico's attack and defense are up to what they should have been base game, which is significantly higher than Faye's. Speed of course would be helpful to him, but it clearly goes against the archetype he's trying to fill. It'd make him too similar to Faye anyway, so keeping it low and making his other stats high makes him stand out more. Like mentioned before, first impressions are massive. The sewers should be more curated to make Rico look good. This would actually be very easy to balance around since the party is completely set and the player has low access to outside resources. If most of the enemies hit hard and had high defense, Rico's physical damage and survivability would stand out a lot more. Citan would be occupied healing himself and Faye, and while Faye could compete with Rico due to his offensive ether, that's a limited resource and the sewers is a long dungeon. Rico would be able to take hits and dish out damage with little to no resource cost. Having such a strong first impression would encourage the player to continue bringing him to battles in the future and learn how to compensate for his weaknesses. Speaking of, Xenogears doesn't really have a good way to patch up Rico's existing problems. I believe the key to a good equipment system is the ability to use the options at your disposal to meaningfully enhance and alter your characters. As things stand, Rico needs to fill up all his accessory slots with speed rings just to keep up with the others. By simply boosting his attack and defense as mentioned, he already becomes a lot more interesting with this equipment system. Now by investing into his speed, you're not just catching him up to the others, but allowing him to outdamage them physically. With his higher defense, he doesn't need to worry about armor too much, as his base stats can compensate for it enough. On the flip side, you could invest into Rico's defenses to make him a truly impenetrable wall. Not requiring healing support means that you save a lot of turns on other characters, even if Rico isn't the one getting those turns. With these simple changes, the player has a lot more control over how Rico plays with their equipment choices, and both of them are powerful and viable options. Now, obviously, this is all just talk. Base game, Rico is pretty much unusable. On foot, he's entirely outclassed the second he joins, and in gear, he only gets a couple of dungeons before Zeebsen comes along to steal his spot. That said, there is a glimmer of hope for him. Xenogears' community is very active, and there exist fan patches out there that can make Rico competitive with the rest of the party members. Among these, I am compelled to mention the Perfect Works build. Rico feels so much better to play in that patch, I couldn't recommend it enough. Anyway, thank you for watching to the end. I know I did trick you into watching a video essay on game design, but I hope this was insightful. If you enjoyed, please make sure to like and subscribe for more actual combat guides in the future, and I'll catch you next time.